Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Value of Clean series. Just a heads up, we're going to be recording this session for future reference. Our first episode introduced the value of clean and why keeping a clean, safe, healthy, and sustainable facility is so important to your overall bottom line. Today, we'd like to focus a little more on the equipment and how to keep your equipment at peak performance. Let's talk a little bit about the value of clean. The series is intended, this webinar series is intended to address the value of clean as it pertains to your facilities and how keeping your facilities clean, safe, and healthy leads to the overall bottom line and effectiveness of your facilities. As we go through today's content, please use the chat feature at the top of your screen to ask for questions. Our panel will address those after the presentation. So let's meet our presenters for today. Dan Hemrick is Service and Repair Supervisor with Imperial Dade in Minneapolis. My name is Jim White. I'm Director of Sales here at Imperial Dade in Minneapolis. And with us also is Bill McGarvey. He is Director of Training and Sustainability with Imperial Dade. Not pictured is Joe Tehan. He is Director of Services for Imperial Dade. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and to Bill McGarvey to go through our content.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking time to attend today's webinar. We are going to, as we go through this presentation, you will learn tips on how to help you save money, time, and reduce downtime by maintaining your equipment. We're going to visually assess, take a visual assessment of our equipment. Before you can improve your maintenance program, you will need to figure out where your team and equipment currently stand. The best place to start is to visually assess your fleet. For example, checking common wear items as squeegee blades, casters, brushes, and other visible damage that you may find outside of the machine. This is a good time to build a fleet inventory if you don't already have one. The list should contain a model, serial number, and year that was put into service, and also the expected end of life, and notes that you find relevant to the performance of the piece. This log can help you schedule timely service, plan and budget for replacements when needed. Do we perform an assessment or performance assessment? This is how your equipment is run. During your assessment, take time to operate the equipment. Is it running the way that it should? Is it making abnormal noises, or is it putting down and picking up solution properly? Doing this with your key operators will keep them involved and interested in keeping the equipment in optimal working condition. For 3, performance review. This is the time to create your maintenance plan. After visual and performance assessments, you should have a good idea of what needs to be done to extend the life of your fleet and keep your downtime at a minimum. It would be rare to see no room for improvement after a proper assessment is completed.
And if I could just chime in for a moment on our assessment before
Yeah,
you go on.
sure.
2 things. One, you mentioned the equipment log or inventory log of the equipment. For any of our listeners that are pursuing green certifications, maybe their facility is pursuing LEED, that's an important piece of that puzzle as well, to have that information, because the sustainable features of equipment is something that is measured within that. And just one other question for actually it's sort of a 3-part question, if you will, for our listeners. Is your facility open to the public? And if it is, are your cleaning technicians performing their work while the public is within the facility? And if that is the case, the real heart of the question that I want to get to is what does your equipment say about the services being provided? Besides just making sure that they're operating properly, what does that equipment look like? All too often, our cleaning equipment does not represent the better aspects of the service being provided. So just something to be aware of. I think we got away with that a lot pre-COVID, but because people became more aware of the services being provided during COVID, they now pay attention a little bit more than maybe we thought they did in the past. So um, on top of keeping the equipment well maintained, it should always or should also present a good image of your service. So that's all I wanted to add there, Dan. So please carry on.
It's important that employees who are operating the equipment have been trained properly. Bad habits and inadequate training can lead to early permanent damage to your fleet. Most manufacturers have thorough videos, checklist wall charts, and training tools on how to safely operate the equipment. These are great for refreshers or training new staff. Make sure that key operators are present when new equipment is installed. Ask your Imperial Dade account manager or equipment specialist if you need help with additional training or support. Leadership commitment. Managers must lead by prioritizing equipment care through ongoing training in order to support their machine operators. This allows for reduced downtime and cost savings because the equipment is operational and there is no need for laborious manual cleaning. Team engagement. Identifying issues and solutions collaboratively. By utilizing a daily checklist, your team can identify potential problematic areas with your equipment. For example, worn squeegee blades that cause improper water recovery. Review your resources. Study equipment manuals, virtual training, or videos. These are located within the manufacturer's websites and manuals that come with your machines. Please take time to study these materials. This can help prevent costly downtime in operating the machines. Create an action plan. Decide what to include and exclude and execute and review. Look at common wear items. For example, or for items that need to be replaced, please reach out to your service center or account manager and we can replenish those items that are needed. Maintenance scheduling. Refer to manuals and schedule regular equipment upkeep. The manual will lay out the service intervals for your equipment. This is a great time to also plan on having your machines looked at or evaluated by one of our service technicians to prolong the life of your machine. Many resources that are available to your disposal. Rely on user manuals, the virtual training programs that are available. We have online training videos, and then also your local equipment specialist. These resources will be available for download at the end of the seminar. We will take a look at some common equipment that you may find in your facility. We have broken this into two categories: daily equipment and intermittent use equipment. Vacuum cleaners. Vacuum cleaners are used every day in all of our facilities. Some maintenance tips for your vacuums. Make sure that hair and debris is cleaned out from the brushes to prolong the life of the bearings that are in there. We want to make sure that we check for clogs and hoses before we start the shift, that we are properly cleaning. Inspect. One of the most expensive or one of the most common issues that we see is damage to power cords, terminal or plug ends broken or missing. And also we want to make sure that we are winding up the cords properly to ensure that those are intact and staying straight. So kind of the idea there is to unplug at the wall and then wind up from the machine towards the wall. And that will make sure that you are getting no swirling in those power cords or things like that. Scrubbers, we want to make sure.
Sorry,
Yes, Bill?
Dan, I just wanted to interject real quickly there.
Yeah.
I'm curious in your time in service here, how many vacuum cords have you seen that were missing a ground prong?
I would
I'm
say
sure.
almost 90% of the vacuums that come in, we see damaged cord ends, missing ground plugs. A lot of this is from getting to the end of the cord and kind of yanking it out of the wall to go to the next spot.
It is all in the wrist, I know.
Yep.
And all too often, the fact of the matter is the vacuum will continue to run without the ground prong, but from a safety standpoint, it should not be run for 1 minute without that ground prong. That is
Exactly.
a built-in safety feature that helps protect the operator of that piece of equipment. And if something goes wrong, the operator could become the ground prong. So really need to stress that. I've been on seminars in the past where people say, oh, OSHA charges X for that. And OSHA doesn't really have a price list, but if they see one, they want to see the rest of the equipment and see, is this an isolated incident or is this just the way you conduct your business? And if it's the way you conduct your business, that could get very pricey for the facility or for the organization. So it seems like a little thing, but it is very important, especially when we think about the operator's safety.
Exactly, Bill. We will move on to scrubbers. It is very important to make sure that we are maintaining our scrubbers. They are used equally as much as vacuum cleaners on our hard floors. Make sure that we are cleaning and rinsing out our recovery tanks after every shift. Nobody likes a smelly tank when they are operating. We want to make sure that we're also cleaning out the solution tank at the end of our shift as well. Chemical buildup in there is detrimental to the solution system, our solution valves and tubes that run through there to bring the solution to the floor. Inspect wearable parts such as squeegee blades. Squeegee blades have 4 usable sides on those. So we want to check those regularly and flip those so that we are recovering as much water as possible off the floor to stay safe and reduce slip and fall hazards after we're cleaning. Check the brushes and skirts, make sure that those are intact and retaining the water properly, as well as squeegee casters. This will position the squeegee at the right height so that we are recovering again as much water off the floor as possible. The other part to check is your debris tray. Make sure that that is empty so that your recovery is proper. And also we want to check our filters on the machines, solution filters in particular, to make sure that the water is flowing to the floor properly as well. Our sweepers, we want to check for debris buildup in the brushes. A lot of items that we pick up will get entangled into those brushes. We want to check the filters to ensure that they are clean so that we can promote ample airflow through the vac system and make sure that the debris tray is empty and clean at the end of the shift. Batteries are also important in both the scrubbers and sweepers. We are going to address that a little bit later, but we just want to maintain our batteries as well. They are the key lifeblood of the machine. We will touch on machines that are intermittent use items. These units are typically not used on a daily basis. They can sometimes cause the biggest headaches though, because they are used once, put into the closet, and then we don't think about them until we come back to the shift or to the job. And we want to make sure that those are ready to go when they come out of storage. Extractors, when these machines go into storage, we want to make sure that brushes are removed so that we can dry out anything that is built up in there, clean under the brush housing, drain the recovery system and solution tanks, and remove all of the lids so that we can properly vent out that machine so that it dries out, so that we are ready to go the next time we need that machine. This will eliminate the need for more maintenance when we want that machine. Log jets and things like that can be a big headache when we get to putting the machine into service again. Burnishers, there are many different types of burnishers that we see. More predominantly are corded and battery, but we also have propane burnishers that are in our locations. We want to make sure that the machine has a brand new pad on it when we go to use it. The skirts are adjusted properly and intact so that we have a proper seal to the floor, so that we can recover a lot of that debris that comes up when we burnish, the dust and top coat of the wax. Make sure that we're putting in new dust filters and checking that the bag is fresh and empty, so that we can recover a lot of that floor finish.
Dan, if I may, on those burnishers real quickly,
Yep.
I'm wondering how commonly you see that people are they're crossing spray buffing and burnishing, and they're using a spray bottle with some sort of a restorative chemical, but they're spraying that over the machine. Really, historically, that's what we did with the old swing machine because that's all we had. But with the advent of today's burnishers, a mop down or even through an auto scrubber, a restore is the preferred method of applying that restoring chemical. Because isn't it, it gives a more even wear on the motor. It's better for the machine that you're doing a mop down versus that spraying because the motor will actually draw some of that spray into the motor and it can build up over time. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Yes. When we do high speed burnishing, it's best to do that without a spray buff. Kind of now with the advent of more restorative methods in cleaning products, we find that works a lot better. The high speed burnishers are actually going to melt that top layer of finish to kind of bring that shine back. So we want to do that without spray buff. So we don't get that buildup in the motor. We do get a lot of, you're going to get more of a tackiness with the spray buff type of products where it's going to cause amp draw issues on the motors and things like that as well.
And it's also a productivity issue because the whole purpose for the burnishing is to get that process done quicker than we were able to achieve it with the old swing machine and the spray bottle. So when we cross the technologies, we're not really taking advantage of the innovation that we did experience. So again, just wanted to kind of drive that point home for our listeners because all too often, we find that the pads are loaded up more than they should be, and like you said, the housing for the machine has that buildup on it as well. So none of that is really good for the overall program.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Now we get to talk about batteries. These are the lifeblood of most machines. It is also one of the costliest repairs single repairs that are on any machine. Knowing how to maximize the life of your equipment batteries is key to a good maintenance program. Assign one person on your team to manage the batteries. For a tip, we recommend checking your batteries every payday. This is an easy reminder to have that person look at those batteries. Know what
Yeah,
batteries are. Go ahead.
Sorry, Dan. I just wanted to pop one other quick thing in here for our listeners. Years ago, I was doing an equipment install. It was a new building, new equipment, new crew, and they had some battery equipment. And we were talking about I'll never forget this battery powered burnisher, walk behind burnisher. I lifted the hood on the machine, I popped the caps on the battery, and I said, now someone has to check these routinely to make sure that we have the proper fluid levels in here. Put the caps back on, finished the training. 6 months later, I was back in the same building. The crew had basically rotated out and it was a new crew. And I was giving my typical spiel, and I lifted the hood on to expose the batteries. I popped the caps off. I said, "Someone has to check," and I looked in. Every cell was bone dry. The problem is everybody knows that somebody should do it, but unless you designate a person or one or two people to be the people to check that routinely, as you suggest, Dan, payday's a great day because everybody remembers when payday rolls around. Check those batteries so that those fluid levels can be maintained at the proper level and you get the most useful life out of the battery, because when that goes dead, it's dead. And I think you even mentioned it is the most expensive wear item on those machines. Just wanted to
Absolutely.
share that little tidbit with everybody.
The other thing is to know what type of batteries you have in your machine. There are three really different types of batteries. You have your maintenance batteries, which are lead acid batteries. So they have a electrolyte filled solution in them. The next are maintenance free. These require little to no maintenance. They're going to be categorized as gel or AGM. And then we also have the lithium batteries, which are becoming very popular in our industry. They are nice because they can be charged, quite honestly, like a phone. You can plug it in whenever you need to, and recharge those on the fly. 15 minutes of charging will give you added runtime. You don't risk short charging them, things like that. When we get to the lead acid and maintenance-free batteries, to prolong the life of those, it is recommended that you charge the batteries anytime you use that machine more than 15 minutes. The advent of smart chargers on our batteries, they know kind of how much to charge that, when to turn them off, or when to turn off the charge cycle, and that. It's recommended that we don't leave our batteries in a discharged state for extended period of time. Batteries do not like to be discharged. The thing is heat. Batteries do not like excessive heat. So when we charge those batteries and store the batteries, we don't want to be in a room or space that has an ambient temperature of 80 degrees or less is kind of that ample spot. Anything above that is where we start to see degradation in those batteries quicker. We want to make sure that the charge cycle has been completed when we plug those in before we reuse that machine. Short charging is a huge deal when it comes to batteries. We see first shift jump on the machine, use it through a shift, and then plug it in, and then it not getting a full charge before second shift starts or before the next operator uses that machine. We want to make sure that the lights on the charger are off and that we've reached a full charge again. Checking electrolyte levels in the batteries is also key. The level should be slightly above the plates before we start to charge. The electrolyte will expand, so we don't want to overfill those batteries. And that will expand during that charging cycle as the battery heats up. We don't want to risk boil over, so we want to be right above the plates before we start that charge cycle. It's also recommended that every 2 hours of operation, we check for loose battery terminals. Then for lead acid batteries, we want to make sure that we are cleaning those batteries as well. They have more risk for boiling over. So you might have some battery acid that forms or is on top of those batteries. So it's recommended that we use a stiff brush and a mixture of baking soda and water to clean the tops of those batteries. We want to make sure that we're also, when we're doing that process, have all of the proper PPE gear on, so glasses and gloves, because that is a corrosive liquid that is in those batteries, the electrolytes. And then we also want to leave the caps on when we clean those batteries. That will eliminate a lot of, or that will make sure that none of the baking soda water mixture gets in and dilutes those batteries. To make maintaining our lead acid batteries easier, you may want to look at adding a battery watering system to your machine. There are a few manufacturers that make these. It makes it kind of a one-point watering system and very easy visual to maintaining your batteries.
So Dan, if I may, just a couple quick things here on the batteries. Yeah, we found, especially going through COVID, when a lot of equipment sat for quite a period of time. You had mentioned the onboard chargers, which are a great innovation for these machines, so we don't have to necessarily go back to the storage area where that old heavy box is sitting on a shelf. But we found or experienced that because the battery was so dead, all the power had run out of it. The onboard charger doesn't really recognize that it's connected to a battery. So that's something that I think, again, our listeners should be paying attention to. If that for some reason they're putting a piece of equipment away for an extended period, they should. Well, actually, what do you recommend? Should they disconnect the battery altogether to try and slow the discharge, or should they just make sure that they get in there and they charge that thing periodically during the downtime? Which would you recommend, Dan?
Yes, Bill. So I would recommend that when that machine goes into storage for more than like 30 days, if it's just going to get parked, that we put a full charge on those batteries. And then we're going to want to come back every 30 days and make sure that we are recharging those. With the smart chargers, they are not maintaining chargers, meaning they will not power back up again to charge the batteries. You will have to unplug the charger from the wall and plug it back in again. So kind of every 30 days, if the machine is going to be parked for extended period of time, recharge those batteries because they will drop in voltage while they are in a parked position or in a non-use scenario. Other than that, you don't really need to disconnect the batteries. Just as long as we keep a full charge on those machines or on those batteries, you should be safe.
Or we're probably better off if the technicians, the cleaning technicians, are not messing around with those terminals and things like that, I guess, huh? And
Exactly.
and you also mentioned the watering systems that some of the manufacturers have made available, in recent years. But for folks that may have an older piece of equipment, it's not a bad idea. Stop by your local auto parts store and just get one of a battery filling pitcher, because
Mhm.
that with your distilled water is the best way to maintain those fluid levels in your traditional lead acid batteries, because the pitcher, it's designed so that it will stop pouring when the cell has been filled to the appropriate level. Yeah, it's almost as bad to overfill as it is to underfill. So we want to have it at the appropriate level. That's the best way to keep the battery providing the maximum service life that it was intended to.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's recap. Um, Think about your resources. Your manual is probably one of your best resources when it comes to your equipment. Not only does it have instructions and use instructions of how to operate that piece of equipment, but it usually has a parts and a schematic list for you to look at parts and order parts that you need for your piece of equipment, and also regular and intermittent maintenance scheduling for that piece of equipment. So please keep your manuals close, read the manuals when you get a piece of equipment, and keep those handy. Also know who to call. Make sure that you know who your account manager, your Imperial Date account manager is. If you don't know who that is, please contact your local branch of Imperial Date, ask for the sales leader at that location, and they'll be able to assign a account manager to your account. So, and get you in touch with your repair and parts department. A big thing, don't wait. Be proactive with your equipment. Make sure that you're inspecting your equipment, especially if your intermittent equipment or your project work equipment. And this is super important for schools. We see a huge flood of equipment coming in May and June for schools. As they go to do their summer work, they find out that their equipment is not in working order. So if you're part of a school district or a higher education account of ours, please get in touch with somebody soon to make sure that your equipment is in top and peak performance before you do your restorative care over the summer. Schedule some preventative services. So we have what we call AMP programs, asset management programs, that we can sign you up with for your entire fleet of equipment, where we would come out periodically and check each piece of equipment and go through all the steps, all the points that we need to cover to make sure that your equipment is always running well. So we want you to avoid costly mistakes by doing all of the things that we outlined on this page. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin. And for some Q&A, are there any questions out there, Caitlin?
Yeah, so the first question in the chat, what would be the appropriate procedure to follow on a piece of battery operated equipment that may be going into storage or idle mode for a couple of months so that the batteries don't lose their effectiveness when we need to put it back into service?
So the biggest thing on that is, again, charging before you put the machine away. You're going to want to charge that through a full cycle, and then that machine can go into storage. You're going to also want to make sure that you're draining all of the solution out of that, so you don't come back to a machine that, but honestly, smells and is blocked up with chemical buildup in the solution system. Yeah, charging before you put that in is going to be the biggest thing. And then if you're going 2 months in storage, I would definitely recommend recharging that again every 30 days.
All right, next question. Is it okay to leave a charged battery on the concrete floor of a building?
That one, I would say probably put that on their, what are they called? On either a pallet or something off of the ground, just to be precautionary on that. Again, so it doesn't become a item that could get hit or run into if you have carts moving through there. Just kind of off the concrete is recommended for that.
I think also, Dan,
Yeah.
part of the concern is, electricity, which is what that battery is generating for us. It seeks the ground. That's why lightning strikes, it comes down to the ground. So if it sits there long enough, it's possible that it could discharge just sitting there doing nothing for us. So
Exactly.
Bill, if I could, back when we were kids, that's something your father told you. You never put a battery on a concrete floor because of the discharge. And that may have been true 40 years ago. The advancement in batteries and the polycarbonate or polypropylene that batteries are made of today, it's perfectly safe to leave the battery on the concrete floor from a discharge end, but from a safety end of hitting it with a pallet jack or something like that, it's a different conversation to have. But as far as discharge and longevity of the battery, it's perfectly safe to leave on the concrete nowadays.
yeah, even the presenters learn something when we attend these webinars.
And I know in our facility, we actually store batteries in kind of a containment tray. In case they're leaking. We don't want that getting on the concrete. So we've got some containment trays that are made for batteries, and we keep either our used or recycled batteries in those trays.
That's another point too, is the battery acid will etch concrete. So if you have a nice polished concrete floor and you get that battery acid on there, you're going to want to neutralize that as quick as possible with the baking soda and water solution for cleanup, and get that off that floor as quick as possible so we don't cause any permanent damage to our floors.
All right, so next question. Flooded batteries also gas off during charging and they get warm. It's my understanding that batteries should not be charged in spaces that are not ventilated, correct?
Correct. So batteries will generate heat and can off gas during the charging process. That's why we want to make sure that we are in a well ventilated area uh, to basically get rid of the smell and the exhaust gas off of those.
Yeah, I actually have a picture of a scrubber that was charging in a closed closet, and I believe the lid was actually down on the battery compartment, so it was not ventilated at all. It actually caught fire, um, set off the fire alarms. This was actually in a nursing community, um, and it was a building service contractor that was providing the service there. It was their scrubber that burned up. At the end of their contract, they did not get a renewal for their services because people are not real fond of your service if you're trying to burn their building down. So, yes, especially with I think the lead acid in particular, we do want to have some decent ventilation around that charging process.
Mhm.
And most good sized storage rooms will suffice. But if we're in a very confined closet, I believe that's another reason why fire marshals don't want to see our equipment in stairwells either. So,
Exactly.
All right, so there's one more question in the chat. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat while we're answering this one. That question is, with the transition to robotic equipment, will Imperial Dade be able to offer the same great service with that new technology?
I would say absolutely we are. I know I'm up in Minneapolis and we have sold a lot of robotic equipment. In fact, we have hired a product specialist, an equipment specialist with a robotic background to help us with our deployments. So we have three different manufacturers that we work with, Tennant, Pringle, and SoftBank, that we work with on robotic equipment. So they're both sweepers and scrubbers, and the technology is just getting better and better. And in a day and age where we have and I know that every BSC struggles with their workforce. These are perfect solutions to that issue. So these are kind of we call them cobotics. So they're employees who come to work every day and they work 4 to 6 hours. They can go back, they can recharge themselves, they can the technology is getting to the point where they'll actually refill, they'll empty, refill, and recharge at the same time and go back out and perform their task or finish their task. So yes, robotics is not the wave of the future. Robotics is now.
Right. So I did find some more questions. We have a few minutes left, so I'll try to get through these. Is it okay to let batteries set in the charger after the charge is complete with the charger power turned on for a period of time? This commenter has an IMOP.
So on an IMOP, you are going to want to make sure that those batteries charge through a cycle, and then you're going to want to remove those from the charger. That is what the manufacturer recommends on that. They do not want those lithium batteries sitting on the charger. It does shut off, but just to protect those batteries, they want you to remove those from there.
How do I know what type, brand, size of equipment is right for my facility?
I would get in touch with your account manager, your Imperial Dade account manager, and they can come out and do a site assessment for you and recommend the correct equipment. And there is a wide variety of equipment throughout all different price ranges. So we want to make sure that we've got the right fit and the right piece of equipment for your facility.
All right. Is it best for a business to run yearly training sessions with their employees to ensure all employees are up to date and refreshed on how to run the equipment? Or is it better to do or to train new staff as they come on board?
I really think a combination of both, but
all the
what we
above.
like, yes, and
Yes.
what we like to do is not only go out and train staff at a facility, but we also like to train trainers. So have some people, some dedicated people here. So when they have some onboarding, they can at least get them through to the next training session. We do training we do annual training at some of our larger accounts, but there are also accounts who we do intermittent training also. But yes, at least once a year.
Absolutely. And the more frequently, the better, quite frankly, and take a look at your own expenses. If you're spending a lot on equipment repairs, I think there's no point in waiting for the annual training to roll around. It's time to do some training right then and there, because I'll let Dan and Jim and Joe really chime in, but I think all too often the repairs that are needed were something that the operator could have nipped in the bud probably long before our tech showed up to do the repair or the equipment came into the service shop. So, people need to know how to use the equipment. They have the equipment to make the job easier. If the equipment's not working properly, the job isn't any easier. So, they really should run that minimally annual training, but there's nothing wrong with doing it 3 or 4 times a year, to be honest.
Bill, if I could, that's a great point. We actually did a case study a few years ago with a customer down in DC that does a bunch of federal facilities. One facility had a PM program with us where we looked at everything every quarter, made sure everything was operating properly. In addition to that, we had our training department go in and train their people on an annual basis. And what we found is when we compared their same business, which was a mile away, versus the one with a PM in training, their overall cost of operation and equipment repair and replacement had diminished by, I think it was 30%. Things were lasting longer, they were running better, and productivity was higher because they weren't with down machines. So there is some research behind this as well. Training helps, PMs help. Worth mentioning as well, looking at the 90 people on our call, we're not just in Minnesota, we're spread out across the US. We have 121 locations across the United States. So most likely there's a service center near you that we can help. So something to keep in mind outside of the Dalco reach, that Imperial Date is throughout the country and in Canada for you as well.
Right. I think that's all the time we have for questions. If there are questions unanswered, feel free to reach out to your sales rep. They'd be more than happy to help you answer any other questions that you have.
Bill, before you do the closing, we'd like to thank Tennant Corporation for sponsoring this event. Tennant is a large supplier of ours for Imperial Dade, forefront of robotics and equipment, and has a solution for just about every single issue you may have at your facility. So thank you, Tennant.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd also like to thank Tennant for sponsoring today, and I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. I hope you found it informative. We hope you'll join us next month for our next episode in our series here, Savvy Sanitation. It's a food service edition. I'll be joined by John Thomas, our Director of Health and Wellness, as well as Jim Leedy, our Director of Chemical Sales. So we hope that you will register for that when the invitation comes out, and we look forward to seeing you there. So thank you again for attending today, and we hope to see you soon. Please, thank you for your participation. Thank you for your engagement. And we want to partner with you. We don't want to just be your suppliers. We want to be your partner so that we can help you provide your customers the best services in the industry. So please stay connected with us. Reach out to your Imperial Dade sales consultant. They are a wealth of information, and if they don't have the answer for you, they got a lot of friends they can phone. So please bring the strength of our organization to bear on your behalf. Thanks again for attending today, and we hope to